And Jung said this about the breadth of the human psyche. It's a quote from Man and His Symbols. The unconscious must not be ignored. It is as natural, as limitless, and as powerful as the stars. And here's a profound quote from Marie-Louise von Franz, one of Jung's right-hand men, women, if you will, one of the main promoters of what I call a traditional view of Jungian psychology. Said personal injuries did not affect him as much as the suffering in the contemporary world, the devastation of nature, the overpopulation problem, the rape of still flourishing non-Christian cultures by the brutality of modern technology. For Jung, these problems were an agony which kept him constantly and indefatigably on the watch for any possibilities for a healing transformation which might emerge from the depth of the psyche. So Jung's start, if you will, with this connection was by growing up in rural Switzerland, started off his life. But when he was 4 years old, he had this powerful dream, this nightmare of an underground phallus that was on a golden throne. And he later came to think of that as kind of God's shadow side, God's side that was in the earth. And it really became the foundation eventually for his interest in alchemy, as we'll see later on with what alchemy is all about. So when he was feeling bad and his parents were arguing and whatnot, he would escape into what he called personality number 2. And in that realm, he said it was old, skeptical, mistrustful, remote from the world of men, but close to nature, the earth, the sun, the moon, the weather, all living creatures. And above all, close to the night, to dreams, and whatever God worked directly in him. Another quote from that personality number 2. This is in Memories, Dreams, Reflections. Besides this world, there existed another realm, like a temple, in which everyone who entered was transformed and suddenly overpowered by a vision of the whole cosmos, so that he could only marvel and admire, forgetful of himself. Here lived the other, who knew God as a hidden, personal, and at the same time supra-personal secret. Here nothing separated man from God. Indeed, it was as though the human mind looked down upon creation simultaneously with God. This personality number 2, this sense of being in the presence of God and of a sense of the whole cosmos in a sacred way, that persisted with him throughout his adolescence. And it later became, when he realized that this was kind of like dissociation, I think it wasn't until he was in college or medical school, they had a dream that helped him realize, no, I can't live in that realm. I've got to be in an I-thou relationship to it. And that realm became his idea of the collective unconscious. So Jung was deeply connected to nature. And there are 2 things that we should examine about that connection. First is he built a retreat on Lower Lake Zurich. Kusnacht, where he lived and where the Jung Institute, one of the 2 Jung Institutes now, actually one of the 3, is in Kusnacht or Zurich. So it started off on the left with that tower. And then on the right, he expanded it 4 times over his life, the last time after his wife and Tony Wolff died. And he would spend extended periods of time there, perhaps up to half of his time at Bollingen in his later years. when he would get there, he would spend up to 3 days just clearing his mind, just staring at the water or chopping wood, just doing mundane tasks. And then being there without electricity and running water in a place that he designed and helped to build and full of his personal symbolism, he sank deeply into his own unconscious, into what is the collective unconscious for many of us, especially here in the West, and could look far into the future. And it's from those depths that much of his writing came, and it was framed and nurtured, if you will, by this connection to the land. The second thing about Jung, important to realize, is that he had a strong identity with Merlin. So the myth of Merlin, there are several myths. It's related to the Grail legend, and Jung thought that was one of the most important myths for the West. The Grail legend emerged around in the 1200s, and one of those versions of the legend was that the chalice that Jesus served the wine in at the Last Supper was used by Joseph of Arimathea to collect the blood when Jesus was speared on the cross. And that chalice somehow or another ended up in the United Kingdom. And that the chalice and the search for that got associated with King Arthur and the legends of the Round Table. And Merlin was an advisor to King Arthur. And Jung felt that Merlin was really the hero of one of the myths of the Arthurian legend of Parsifal. So this is Merlin. He was a druidic shaman, and a very important concept is related to this. Jung's challenge to modern men and women was to unite their cultured side with what he liked to call the 2 million-year-old man within. What my dear friend, the late Fred Gustafson, said, the indigenous one within. And Jung said that one of the challenges that Christianity had to deal with was to come to terms with the so-called paganism and heathenism that they had been persecuting for centuries. They had to integrate that knowledge and that connection to the land and the sacred connection to the land like indigenous people had. And Merlin was Jung's archetypal image for that, if you will.